The lights in the studio burned like a spotlight on the nation's tension. Cameras swiveled, capturing every twitch, every forced smile, every flicker of anticipation in the eyes of those who knew something was about to explode. The air felt electric, thick with the scent of anticipation, the hum of whispered speculation. No one could look away. The viewers at home were glued to their screens, sensing that the ordinary was about to become extraordinary. And then it happened. Across the polished debate floor, a voice, shrill, venomous, dripping with arrogance, cut through the chatter like a knife. Words meant to humiliate, to intimidate, to assert dominance. The kind of words that make the audience recoil, mouths open in disbelief. Cameras captured every reaction, the gasp from the crowd, the journalists stiffening in shock, the instant online flurry of alerts lighting up phones across the country. No one expected this to happen live on national TV. The villain's arrogance was on full display. Every gesture, every smirk screamed certainty, a belief in untouchable power. It was a performance, calculated, designed to provoke and dominate. The crowd felt the weight of it. The tension thickened like a storm ready to break. The villain's voice rose, sharper now, striking at dignity with the casual cruelty only those who feel invincible can wield. And then, across the room, the hero remained calm. There was no flinch, no tremor of fear. Eyes steady, posture deliberate, presence commanding without arrogance. A quiet confidence radiated, like the calm at the eye of the storm. For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the crack in the hero's composure, expecting the collapse. But it never came. In that charged silence, the audience at home felt it too. The moment wasn't just about words on a screen. It was about justice, about dignity, about truth meeting arrogance in real time. Every viewer felt the pull, the curiosity, the rising pulse of what was to come. The question lingered, unspoken but urgent. How would this unfold? Who would prevail when the storm finally hit? The camera lingered on the hero's composed face, the villain's smirk tightening, and in that suspended instant, everyone knew this confrontation would not end quietly. The nation's eyes were fixed, and the world had yet to see the first blow.
The tension on that debate stage did not exist in a vacuum. This confrontation was the culmination of years of political maneuvering, of narratives carefully spun to divide, distract, and dominate. The villain had built a career on bluster and spectacle, each public appearance a performance designed to thrill supporters while silencing dissent. But behind the camera, the stakes were far higher than anyone realized. This was not merely a clash of personalities, it was a battle over the soul of a nation, over the values that defined who Americans were, or claimed to be. Across the country, communities watched with bated breath. Immigrant families, whose stories had often been reduced to headlines and sound bites, saw themselves in this moment. Their struggles, sacrifices, and relentless pursuit of dignity were suddenly mirrored in the calm resolve of the hero. For them, this confrontation was not abstract politics. It was validation, a public acknowledgement that their voices mattered, that their identities were inseparable from the country's future. And for those who had long been silenced, the stakes were even higher. This was a fight for recognition, for the assertion that humanity and justice were not negotiable. The political climate had been a powder keg for months. Polarizing legislation, inflammatory rhetoric, and deliberate attempts to marginalize voices like the heroes had created a landscape where every word, every gesture carried immense weight. Millions were watching, not just to witness a debate, but to see whether the nation could uphold its own ideals under fire. And now, as cameras rolled and every expression was magnified for the world to see, the stage was set for a reckoning. The villain's power was undeniable. With a smirk that seemed to mock empathy itself, they had built a following that thrived on spectacle and outrage. Every insult landed with precision, calculated to provoke outrage and fuel fear. But the hero represented something far more enduring: resilience, dignity, and the courage to speak truth even when the odds were insurmountable. In the theater of politics, one side wielded chaos as a weapon, while the other wielded principle as a shield. Social media had already begun to buzz with anticipation. Clips of the initial clash circulated in real time, hashtags trending, opinions flying like sparks in a storm. Commentators speculated, pundits analyzed, and the nation felt the pulse of a moment that promised consequences far beyond the confines of a single televised segment. "What happens next will shock the nation," they whispered as millions of eyes stayed locked on the unfolding drama. Every viewer understood instinctively that this was not just about winning an argument. This was about what kind of society Americans wanted to be, about whether integrity could withstand the assault of arrogance, whether truth could pierce the veil of performance and spectacle. The hero's calm defiance was no longer a private stance, it was a rallying cry, a beacon for anyone who had ever felt marginalized, dismissed, or underestimated. And as the tension thickened, the audience could feel the inevitability of collision. Words were about to become weapons, composure a form of resistance, and every pause, every glance, every breath would matter. The stakes had been raised, and the world was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to break in ways no one could yet predict.
The villain did not emerge overnight. Their rise had been carefully choreographed, a mixture of charisma, opportunism, and an uncanny instinct for exploiting fear. To the public, they appeared confident, decisive, unyielding, a figure who demanded attention and allegiance. But beneath the polished speeches and relentless smiles lay contradictions that few dared to highlight. Their promises of fairness often masked policies that disproportionately favored the powerful, while their claims of empathy rarely extended beyond the cameras. Every declaration of virtue was a carefully constructed illusion, a veneer over a core defined by self-interest and manipulation. From early in their career, the villain displayed an unrelenting hunger for influence. Campaigns were waged with aggressive precision, each debate, each public appearance meticulously designed to dominate the narrative. Critics who questioned motives or ethics were swiftly marginalized, dismissed as naive or obstructive. Yet despite their growing prominence, whispers of corruption followed closely behind. Lobbyists, secret deals, and selective advocacy painted a picture far darker than the public persona. And while the villain relished applause and adulation, there was a growing tension between image and reality, one that the hero would soon expose. What set this figure apart, and yet sowed the seeds of eventual downfall, was an arrogance that knew no bounds. Confidence transformed into hubris. Every misstep, every miscalculated insult was delivered with the smug certainty that consequences were for others, not for them. In private, aides and advisors spoke of volatile temperaments, of outbursts that could unsettle even seasoned professionals. In public, those same behaviors were masked as theatrical flair or decisive leadership, leaving audiences unaware of the fissures beneath the surface. The villain's past was dotted with moments that, in retrospect, seemed like warnings. Ethical inquiries that ended with technical loopholes rather than true accountability. Statements that contradicted previous positions, later rationalized as evolving thought. Each instance built a pattern, a map of a character whose integrity was negotiable and whose morality bent toward convenience. To the untrained eye, they seemed unstoppable. To those paying attention, however, the cracks were already forming. Tiny fractures that only needed pressure to expand into a collapse. Contrast this with the hero, whose trajectory was defined not by spectacle, but by sacrifice. Every decision, every action was rooted in principle rather than performance. Where the villain wielded fear as a weapon, the hero relied on conviction. Where arrogance reigned, humility guided. The visual contrast was almost cinematic, one figure radiating calculated aggression, the other embodying calm, deliberate moral authority. In every encounter, the tension between these two forces became increasingly undeniable. The audience could sense it, even if the villain could not. And yet, the villain thrived on attention. Controversy became currency, outrage a tool to rally supporters. Each scandal that might have ended a less audacious career was instead spun into evidence of resilience, proof of strength, a narrative carefully curated to bolster a myth. But the same tactics that elevated them also heightened vulnerability. The more they manipulated, the more visible their patterns became, and the more inevitable it seemed that someone with courage, clarity, and unwavering principle would challenge the facade. There were moments in interviews, in speeches, and behind closed doors where even aides noticed it. The villain's composure faltered for the briefest instant. A flash of doubt, a flicker of irritation, a micro-expression betraying the cracks beneath the carefully crafted exterior. Audiences at home, if they were perceptive, might catch it too, a subtle reminder that no matter how powerful the villain seemed, their power was conditional, fragile, and increasingly exposed. Every misstep, every contradiction set the stage for the hero's inevitable confrontation. The villain's own flaws became the instruments of their undoing. Hubris, deceit, and arrogance were no longer just character traits. They were vulnerabilities, waiting for the right pressure, the right moment to shatter the carefully constructed persona. And as the nation watched, unaware just how deep the fractures ran, one truth was undeniable. The hero's calm, principled defiance was about to collide with the villain's arrogance in a way that would leave audiences stunned, vindicated, and hungry for justice. The villain may have commanded attention, manipulated narratives, and silenced critics, but every calculated move carried within it the seeds of downfall. Every smirk, every dismissive glance, every public boast was a step closer to exposure. And in the shadow of this carefully maintained facade, the stage was set. The world was about to witness the confrontation that would not only challenge a figure of power, but also force a reckoning with the arrogance that had long gone unchallenged. The storm was coming, and the first cracks were already appearing.
The hero's story began not in the glare of cameras or the echo of applause, but in quiet moments of struggle, in the invisible labor of building a life rooted in dignity and purpose. Born to parents who had crossed oceans seeking opportunity, safety, and a future, the hero inherited a sense of responsibility that extended beyond personal ambition. Every lesson learned in crowded classrooms, every sacrifice made in the shadow of uncertainty was a brick in the foundation of a character defined by resilience. From an early age, the hero understood that progress was never free, that every achievement demanded courage, and that true leadership was measured not by recognition, but by the lives uplifted along the way. Growing up, the hero witnessed inequities that most politicians never had to see firsthand. Families struggling to navigate immigration systems, communities left behind by economic shifts, neighbors who were silenced or marginalized because their stories did not fit the dominant narrative. These experiences did not embitter the hero, they galvanized them. They shaped a worldview in which empathy was strength, in which integrity could never be compromised, and in which every action, no matter how small, was a chance to affirm the dignity of those too often overlooked. Education became both sanctuary and weapon. The hero excelled in academic arenas while balancing the demands of part-time work and family obligations, often carrying the weight of responsibilities that should never fall on young shoulders. Each late-night study session, each missed social gathering was an investment in a future where they could speak not only for themselves, but for millions whose voices were too frequently ignored. It was during these formative years that the hero learned patience under pressure, the art of listening before speaking, and the power of preparation as a shield against chaos. Service to the community soon followed naturally. From grassroots organizing to volunteering at local shelters, the hero's approach was never performative, it was personal. They understood the stakes in a way that textbooks could not teach. Each action had real consequences. Each decision impacted lives. Whether advocating for policy change, mentoring youth, or defending the rights of the marginalized, the hero built credibility not through showmanship, but through consistency, accountability, and a tireless commitment to justice. Their reputation grew quietly, steadily, like the roots of a tree weathering every storm, resilient and unyielding. But the path was not without sacrifice. The hero endured personal attacks, ridicule, and the relentless pressure of navigating a political landscape stacked against those who dared to challenge the status quo. Family moments were stolen by long hours of advocacy, nights surrendered to strategy sessions, and public misrepresentation became a constant trial. Yet each obstacle strengthened the hero's resolve. Where others might have buckled under scrutiny or compromise, the hero learned to transform adversity into preparation, criticism into clarity, and pressure into poise. Perhaps most compelling was the hero's moral compass, a steadfast refusal to bend principles for expediency. In a world where ambition often eclipsed conscience, the hero remained grounded in values inherited from a life of struggle and observation, justice, empathy, and the belief that leadership meant serving others, not oneself. These principles were not abstract ideals, they were lived experiences, encoded into the hero's decisions, shaping every speech, every debate, every confrontation. Audiences could feel this authenticity even before words were spoken. It was this combination of lived experience, disciplined preparation, and unwavering integrity that uniquely positioned the hero for the confrontation now unfolding. While the villain relied on theatrics, the hero brought the weight of history, sacrifice, and a deeply personal understanding of what was at stake. Every calm gesture, every deliberate word, every measured pause carried the gravity of someone who had endured hardship, borne responsibility, and emerged stronger for it. The hero's strength was quiet, but it was unshakable, a force forged through empathy, resilience, and moral clarity. And there was a reason audiences rooted for the hero beyond politics. They represented the ordinary turned extraordinary, those who had labored without recognition, fought without fanfare, and persevered when systems were designed to impede them. They embodied the aspirations of immigrants, the marginalized, the overlooked, and the underestimated. Watching the hero was not merely witnessing one person's triumph, it was seeing the affirmation of a collective identity, a reminder that dignity and perseverance mattered in a world that often tried to erase them. Even now, as the cameras focused on the stage and the villain prepared to strike, the hero's past loomed as both armor and strategy. Every lesson learned, every sacrifice made, every quiet victory along the way became ammunition for the showdown to come. Their life story was not just context, it was evidence of capacity, resilience, and readiness. The audience could sense it instinctively. This was not someone easily rattled, someone who could be distracted by theatrics or intimidation. The hero's resolve was forged in thousands of quiet battles long before this one, and now it was about to face its ultimate test. And as the nation watched, a subtle tension lingered in the air. The hero's past was not just a backstory, it was a promise. A promise that no matter how loud the villain, how sharp the attack, how calculated the spectacle, dignity, integrity, and truth had a champion on that stage. The crowd, the viewers, the nation, they all knew that what was about to unfold would not only expose the villain, but would also elevate the hero to a place that transcended politics, a symbol of resilience, justice, and the enduring power of principle.
The room had grown electric, the kind of charged atmosphere where every breath felt amplified. What began as a tense exchange quickly spiraled into a collision of wills, words ricocheting like bullets across the stage. The villain leaned forward, eyes flashing, voice sharp, unleashing a volley of insults calculated to provoke, belittle, and dominate. Each accusation landed with the precision of a practiced hand, designed to make the hero falter, to make doubt ripple through the audience. The nation watched, hearts racing, as the verbal barrage escalated beyond decorum, teetering on the edge of chaos. But the hero remained composed. Calm, deliberate, and unwavering, they absorbed the assault without blinking, letting the villain's own aggression define the energy of the moment. Each smile, each measured pause contrasted with the villain's escalating agitation. Where arrogance sought to intimidate, composure projected strength. Where venom tried to provoke panic, integrity radiated quiet authority. The tension was almost palpable. Two forces at full power, a test of endurance, strategy, and principle. The villain's attacks grew more personal. Each statement aimed to provoke an emotional response. There were jabs at heritage, insinuations about character, challenges to credibility meant to provoke outrage. The crowd reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs, and some audible shouts reverberated through the studio. Social media erupted in real time. Hashtags began trending, video clips circulated within seconds, reactions pouring in from all corners of the country. Analysts speculated on potential missteps, commentators debated strategy, and viewers at home leaned forward, eyes fixed, hearts thudding with anticipation. The digital world was a mirror of the chaos unfolding live, amplifying every insult, every pause, every glance. The villain grew visibly frustrated. Hands tightened on podiums, jaw muscles clenched, voice rising in pitch as miscalculations compounded. Their carefully rehearsed performance began to crack, each misstep magnified under the scrutiny of millions. But the hero remained unflinching. Even as the villain's tone sharpened and rhetoric became increasingly theatrical, the hero's responses were measured, precise, and calm. It was a battle not of volume or fury, but of substance versus spectacle. Every audience member could feel the disparity. One figure consumed by ego and agitation, the other grounded in principle and prepared for the storm. At one point, the villain attempted a particularly cutting remark designed to provoke laughter or scorn from the audience. The crowd hesitated, unsure how to react. The hero, however, countered not with rage, but with a steady, reasoned statement that exposed the hollow core of the villain's attack. Cameras caught every detail: the tightening of the villain's smirk, the subtle shift in posture, the flicker of doubt in otherwise confident eyes. Social media erupted anew, viewers replaying the moment, sharing clips with captions that praised the hero's poise and questioned the villain's credibility. The escalation reached a fever pitch as the debate entered a series of rapid exchanges, words sharp as knives, accusations flying with the force of years of built-up tension. Every pause from the hero became a calculated tension point.
every calm word a contrast to the villain's unraveling. The stakes were no longer abstract, they were felt viscerally in the audience's collective pulse, in the way viewers leaned closer to their screens, in the chorus of digital commentary swelling by the second. By the end of this escalating confrontation, it was clear. The hero was prepared not just to withstand the onslaught, but to turn it into an opportunity. The villain, once commanding, now seemed rattled, missteps multiplying, anger overtaking strategy. The world could see it. The balance of power was shifting, the moment of reckoning drawing nearer. And as the debate poised on the edge of its climax, the audience waited with bated breath, sensing that the hero's counterattack, the mic-drop revelation that could topple arrogance with truth, was just moments away.
The air in the debate hall shifted as the hero leaned forward, voice steady but filled with quiet intensity. The villain, sensing momentum slipping, attempted another sharp retort, words aimed to provoke panic or defensiveness. But the hero remained unshaken, eyes locking on the audience, then on the villain, delivering the first line that would define the moment. Not a scream, not a boast, but a statement of undeniable truth. The room went still. Cameras zoomed in. Every eye, from the front row of the studio to millions watching at home, was fixed. The hero began dismantling the villain's arguments methodically. Each point raised by arrogance and spectacle was met with calm clarity, facts presented without aggression, logic layered over empathy. Statistics that exposed inequality past statements of hypocrisy, contradictions in policy. Everything was delivered with surgical precision. And with every fact, every citation, the villain's smirk faltered, the posture tightened, the veneer of invincibility cracking under the weight of reason. A collective gasp rippled through the audience as the first blow landed, not with drama, but with the quiet authority of truth. The hero paused deliberately, letting the silence stretch long enough for the weight of the words to sink in. It was a calculated move, a masterstroke of timing that transformed the room into a theater of anticipation. The villain attempted to interject, voice rising with frustration, but each attempt was cut short by the hero's composed retort, articulate and unwavering. With every rebuttal, the audience felt it. This was not just a debate, not just an argument. It was the confrontation of integrity against arrogance, principle against manipulation, dignity against spectacle. The hero then turned to the moral core of the confrontation. It wasn't enough to prove facts. It was necessary to expose the human cost of the villain's actions. Stories were recounted, not abstract anecdotes, but real lives affected by policy, by rhetoric, by decisions made in boardrooms and legislative chambers. Names, faces, communities brought into the narrative to humanize the statistics. The room was silent as the audience absorbed the weight of each example. Social media feeds lighting up as people shared snippets in real time, praise cascading through comments and posts, hashtags trending as people rallied around the clarity and moral courage displayed before them. The villain's confidence had now fractured visibly. A sharp intake of breath here, a shifting foot there, an almost imperceptible tightening of the jaw. They attempted to interrupt again, a flailing effort to regain control, but the hero anticipated every move. Calmly, strategically, the hero employed contrast, measured tone against bluster, evidence against empty assertion, composure against panic. It was as if every lesson learned through years of sacrifice, every moment of preparation and resilience had led to this precise point. The hero was not merely responding, they were orchestrating a crescendo that left the villain exposed, vulnerable, and increasingly desperate.
As the hero continued, the crowd's reactions intensified. Murmurs became applause, gasps punctuated the sentences, and even the press, initially cautious, impartial, leaned forward, captivated by the spectacle of reason triumphing over arrogance. Social media amplified the impact. Clips of the hero's calm dismantling of the villain's arguments went viral within minutes, commentators lauding not just the content, but the courage and poise with which it was delivered. The villain, once commanding attention through spectacle, now struggled to command even a fragment of credibility. And then came the moment that would be remembered long after the camera stopped rolling. A line delivered with perfect timing that crystallized the hero's argument and punctured the villain's narrative entirely. It was not a scream, not an accusation, but a statement of moral authority, of truth, of principle, succinct, undeniable, and devastatingly effective. The room seemed to inhale collectively, the villain frozen mid-response, the hero's calm brilliance holding sway over the chaos that had been mounting for minutes. Each word landed like a hammer, each syllable reinforcing the undeniable clarity of right versus arrogance. The hero layered in additional evidence, carefully chosen to be both factual and morally resonant. Charts, quotations, historical precedents, interwoven with stories of real people whose lives had been affected by policies and statements the villain had championed. With each revelation, the villain's agitation intensified. Hands trembled slightly on the podium, eyes darted in fleeting desperation, lips tightening as if to contain words that no longer held sway. The hero's methodical presentation of fact, principle, and empathy became a spotlight on the cracks in the villain's armor, magnifying every weakness for all to see. And yet it was the hero's composure that truly commanded awe. In a world accustomed to spectacle, to the loud and the flashy, the quiet confidence of someone anchored in truth and preparation was disarming. Every pause, every deliberate gesture, every steady breath communicated that the hero was untouchable in this moment, not through aggression, but by mastery of principle and clarity. Audience members leaned forward, viewers at home felt hearts tighten, social media feeds lit up with admiration and awe. It was not just a victory of rhetoric, it was a validation of courage, integrity, and the enduring power of perseverance. The villain, sensing defeat, attempted one final flourish, a desperate attempt to regain momentum with a sharp accusation and a pointed gesture. But the hero, anticipating the move, allowed a deliberate pause. Silence filled the studio, every eye on the stage, every heartbeat synchronized with anticipation. Then came the final statement, concise, powerful, and morally unassailable. A mic drop moment, not theatrical, but profoundly effective. The villain froze mid-response, the audience erupted, and the hero's triumph became a palpable, almost tangible force in the room. As the applause and murmurs cascaded, the nation watching felt the full weight of what had just occurred. Social media erupted with praise, commentators scrambled to analyze the hero's strategy, and ordinary viewers shared clips with captions affirming courage, principle, and justice. The villain, once a symbol of unassailable arrogance, had been dismantled by calm reasoning, moral clarity, and unwavering resilience. The counterattack was complete, and the hero had not only survived the onslaught, but transformed it into an emblem of triumph that resonated far beyond the studio walls. And yet, as the echo of applause faded, the tension remained. The nation had witnessed the first blow in a larger confrontation, a reminder that integrity could prevail against arrogance, that preparation, empathy, and courage could dismantle spectacle, and that one person's steadfast commitment to principle could inspire millions. The hero had won the moment, but the resonance would ripple outward, setting the stage for consequences that no one could yet predict.
The moment the hero's words landed, the world seemed to pause for a heartbeat, then erupted into a storm of reaction. Social media exploded, a tidal wave of posts, hashtags, and clips cascading across platforms. Hashtag dignity over arrogance trended within minutes. Memes circulated that captured the hero's calm poise in stark contrast to the villain's flailing gestures. Clips of the mic drop line were shared and reshared, each iteration amplifying the emotional punch of the confrontation. Every notification pinged like a heartbeat, a reminder that the moment was no longer confined to a television screen. It had become a national conversation, a digital wildfire spreading across communities, timelines, and group chats. Commentators scrambled to respond. Pundits on news panels leaned into analysis, dissecting every word, every pause, every subtle gesture. Analysts pointed out how the hero had methodically dismantled the villain's arguments, highlighting contradictions and exposing the fragility of previously unchallenged power. Social media influencers chimed in with commentary that ranged from awe to outrage, sharing personal reflections on why this clash resonated so deeply. It was more than a debate. It was a cultural touchstone, a reference point that would be cited for weeks as a symbol of principled confrontation. Celebrities and public figures added their voices to the chorus. Tweets, Instagram stories, and video reactions praised the hero's courage and clarity, framing the moment as a triumph of dignity over spectacle. Some shared personal anecdotes, connecting the hero's calm and resilient stance to struggles they themselves had faced, making the moment feel intimate and collective simultaneously. Politicians, too, weighed in, some cautiously acknowledging the hero's composure, others using the moment to stake moral ground, signaling alignment with values the audience could recognize and support. The ripple effect was undeniable. The conversation extended far beyond partisan lines, touching ordinary citizens, cultural commentators, and thought leaders alike. The villain, once commanding attention and controlling narratives, became the subject of scrutiny and ridicule. Clips of their attempts to interrupt, their flustered gestures, and their increasingly desperate tone were replayed incessantly. Analysts dissected every misstep, highlighting a growing perception of instability and arrogance. The narrative that had elevated them for so long began to fracture, replaced by one where competence and poise were measured not by spectacle, but by integrity and empathy. In this new narrative, the hero emerged not just victorious, but emblematic of values that resonated deeply with the public. Public discourse began to shift in real time. News cycles dedicated hours to breaking down the confrontation, highlighting the moral and factual clarity the hero had demonstrated. Social media threads debated the implications, with users analyzing how principles versus performance played out on the national stage. Online communities, particularly those centered on immigrant rights, social justice, and identity pride, found a sense of validation. For millions who had felt marginalized or silenced, the hero's performance became a symbol that their voices mattered, that courage grounded in principle could challenge even the most entrenched power. Even in workplaces, coffee shops, and homes, the conversation persisted. People replayed clips, quoted lines, and debated the significance of each exchange. It became common to hear phrases like, "Did you see how they handled that?" Or, "Finally, someone stood up to that arrogance." The moment transcended politics, reaching into culture, identity, and shared values. It became a benchmark for how debates, and by extension leadership, could be conducted with integrity, courage, and respect for human dignity. Memes and viral content, while often humorous, carried an underlying message. The hero had shifted perception.
challenging what audiences expected from authority, debate, and confrontation. Each share, each comment, each retweet reinforced the cultural imprint of the moment. What had started as a single televised clash had grown into a movement of awareness, conversation, and engagement. The public felt involved, empowered, and validated, as if their own values and struggles had been acknowledged on a stage watched by millions. By the end of the night, the consequences of the confrontation were already taking shape. The villain's credibility had waned, while the hero's stature soared. Commentators predicted ripple effects in policy discussions, public perception, and political strategy. Social media algorithms amplified the moment, ensuring that it would remain in the collective consciousness long after the cameras turned off. Audiences shared personal reflections, drawing connections between the hero's composure and their own struggles for dignity, identity, and justice. The shock waves were not just ephemeral, they signaled a turning point, a moment where public discourse, national attention, and cultural conversation aligned around courage, principle, and integrity. The confrontation became a reference point, a lesson, and a rallying cry for those who believed that truth and morality could triumph over arrogance and spectacle. And as the nation absorbed the magnitude of what had unfolded, one thought lingered, unspoken but unavoidable. The storm had passed, but its ripples would shape the conversation and the conscience of the country for a long time to come.
As the echoes of the debate faded, the hero's presence lingered, not in the theatrics of victory, but in the quiet resonance of principle. The confrontation had ended, yet its impact radiated far beyond the studio lights. In that decisive moment, dignity had triumphed over arrogance, integrity over spectacle, and courage over intimidation. The nation had witnessed more than a clash of personalities. It had seen the affirmation of values that transcend politics, the enduring power of service, empathy, and moral clarity. The hero's victory was not merely personal, it was symbolic. Every viewer who had felt marginalized, overlooked, or silenced could see themselves reflected in that calm, resolute stance. It was a reminder that integrity is not dependent on applause, that courage is not defined by the loudness of one's voice, and that leadership is measured not by spectacle, but by the commitment to justice and humanity. The hero had reframed the conflict from a battle over opinion to a lesson about enduring principles that guide how a nation should see itself and treat its people. In the aftermath, conversations shifted from the villain's missteps to the hero's unwavering values. Across social media, in living rooms and workplaces, people debated not only what had been said, but why it mattered. Dignity had been defended. Truth had been amplified. The moral high ground had become visible to millions. The lesson was clear. When arrogance is confronted with calm certainty, when injustice is met with principled resistance, the effect reverberates far beyond the moment, inspiring others to act, speak, and stand for what is right. The hero's example reminded the audience that service to others, sacrifices made quietly, tirelessly, and without expectation of recognition, shapes the foundation of a just society. Leadership, it became clear, is not the loudest voice in the room, but the one guided by empathy, foresight, and moral courage. The confrontation had crystallized these values in a way that statistics, speeches, and reports never could. For millions, it was validation, a confirmation that integrity matters, that principles are worth defending, and that one person's resolve can illuminate the path for countless others. The emotional crescendo was palpable. As viewers reflected on what had transpired, there was a shared recognition that this was more than a debate.
It was a demonstration of what a nation could aspire to be. Pride in identity, respect for human dignity, and commitment to justice were not abstract ideals. They were actionable, visible, and victorious in the hero's conduct. People felt empowered, inspired to carry these lessons into their own communities, workplaces, and conversations. The hero's triumph became a template for courage, a reminder that standing firmly in principle can change the narrative, influence culture, and redefine expectations. In the final reflection, the hero's story, built on resilience, sacrifice, and empathy, became inseparable from the moment itself. The confrontation was resolved, but the moral resonance continued to grow. It offered hope, a reminder that no matter how entrenched arrogance or corruption may seem, the enduring values of justice, dignity, and service can prevail. The audience could feel it deeply. The nation's conscience had been stirred, its ideals momentarily illuminated, and the path forward made clearer by one act of courage. As the screen faded from the debate stage to the voices of commentators, clips of applause, and the viral social media echoes, one truth remained unmistakable. Integrity endures. Arrogance collapses under scrutiny. Courage inspires action. The hero had not just defended themselves. They had defended what the nation could and should stand for. And in that reflection, viewers were left not only with satisfaction, but with purpose, reminded that the values of dignity, justice, and service are timeless, universal, and, when embraced, unstoppable.
And so, the confrontation that began with a shocking moment on live television came to a close, leaving a nation both stunned and inspired. From the villain's arrogance to the hero's unwavering composure, viewers had witnessed more than a debate. They had seen a triumph of dignity, principle, and courage in real time. What started as a headline-grabbing clash became a lesson in integrity, proving that calm, prepared, and principled action can dismantle even the most brazen displays of arrogance. The hero's example resonates far beyond the studio lights. For anyone who has ever felt marginalized, dismissed, or underestimated, this moment was a validation that your voice matters, that your story is powerful, and that standing firmly in your values can create ripple effects across an entire nation. It's a reminder that courage is not loud, it is consistent, deliberate, and rooted in truth. The nation saw that principle, when wielded with clarity and empathy, can outlast spectacle, criticism, and fear. Now it's your turn to be part of this movement. Share this story, discuss it, and carry its lessons into your own life. Celebrate courage and dignity when you see it. Engage in conversations about justice, integrity, and the values that shape a fair society. Subscribe to stay connected to stories that matter, where truth and principle take center stage, and where ordinary people and extraordinary heroes remind us all of what is possible. The debate may have ended, but the ripple effects continue. The hero's triumph is a call to action, a challenge to each of us to stand with clarity, act with courage, and uphold the values that define who we are. Don't just watch the story unfold. Be part of shaping the next chapter.